They told Marcus Torres he was filling a vacancy. What they didn't tell him was that in Whisperwood, vacancies keep breathing after you close the door. He arrived at dusk with the kind of optimism that makes other people nostalgic. 28. Steady-handed, competent, in the way that comes from years of city parks where the worst emergencies wore neon joggers. The sign for Whisperwood Forest Station stood just off a gravel pullout, a wooden plank gone soft around the edges, the letters hand-carved and dark with age. Behind it, the station itself loomed up out of the pines, half cabin, half bunker, its windows reflecting a sky the color of gunmetal. A battered radio tower leaned like it was listening to the tree line. When he killed the engine, the world snapped shut. Tires ticked as they cooled. A single fly explored the tailgate. Somewhere a woodpecker tested a trunk like a dentist tapping a tooth. Farther out, a low wind moved through the crowns without touching the ground. The air smelled like sap and old water. He hauled his duffel from the back and found the front door already open. A woman stood in the warm spill of the entryway light, sleeves pushed to the elbow, hair pulled back in the kind of knot that says I don't have time to care how this looks. Her badge read Vance. She had the posture of someone who has seen a lot of knights keep their secrets. Marcus Torres, she said. He stuck out a hand. That's me, Eleanor Vance. Station supervisor. Her grip was dry, cool, no nonsense. She stepped back to let him in. You made good time. Traffic from the valley can be a creature. I left early, he said. Then, because she looked like the sort of person who appreciates a truth that doesn't sell itself. I wanted to get here before dark. Practical, she said. You'll need that. The station's main room felt like a map of its own history. Pegboards crowded with tools, laminated charts thumbtacked to cork, shelves bowed under the weight of binders labeled by year and sector. Radios sat on a steel rack along the back wall, their green displays glowing like insect eyes. A short hallway led to a kitchenette with a coffee maker that had seen things. A staircase climbed to a mezzanine where two doors waited side by side like choices. Eleanor moved through it with practiced economy. She pointed things out as they went, not pausing long enough to watch whether he was impressed. First aid cabinets there, and one in the truck bay. AED in the hall. Breaker panel behind the file case. If a storm comes and knocks us offline, switch to backup and use the roof antenna, not the tower. You'll see why later. Her eyes flicked to the windows, taking inventory. He trailed her, absorbing the smell of old paper and oil, the way the floor gave under late-century lumber. The radios emitted a soft, constant murmur, just enough chatter to remind him the rest of the world existed. His chest loosened. He could do this. It was just different trees, and a deeper kind of quiet. Eleanor stopped at the rack of handhelds and tapped one with a nail. Primary, his channel 7. Weather's on 4. Fire dispatch on 12. If you hear chatter on 19. She hesitated. Just a breath. Then finished too briskly. You won't. If you do, log it, and we'll review it in the morning. We don't respond on 19. He almost asked why, then didn't. Rules first. Reasons later. Copy. She nodded, like she'd been watching for that answer. Good. Your quarters are upstairs. Left door. She pulled a key from her pocket, brass worn smooth. Ben's. The key paused in the air. Her mouth closed around the name like a person catching a glass before it hits the floor. Previous rangers, she said. His things were cleared. Mostly. Marcus took the key and pretended not to notice the stumble. What happened to him, he asked, because pretending to already know would be worse. He went out on patrol one night. She looked him in the eye when she said it. He didn't come back. Then she looked away, toward the radios, as if expecting them to contradict her. None did. We searched. For months. Any idea? Don't speculate. She said it gently. It makes the nights longer. You'll get the story from a dozen different mouths down in town. Treat it like smoke. We deal in fire. Sunkaru, he wanted to make a joke about campfire tales, something to sand down the edge. He didn't. She didn't look like she would appreciate jokes about edges. They climbed the stairs. The boards murmured under their weight and the air changed. Upstairs smelled faintly of old soap and cedar chips, the ghost of a cigarette a long time put out. She opened the door on the left and let him in. The apartment was the size of a decent studio. A narrow kitchenette. A table with 2 mismatched chairs. A small couch that looked like it had accepted more apologies than it had given comfort. The bedroom had a window looking down on the gravel lot, and beyond that, the first rank of pines. Someone had scrubbed the place hard, but cleaning only ever erases what it can name. A pale ring stained the windowsill where a mug had lived. 2 nail holes sat above the dresser, empty eyelets. A hook by the door gleamed bare where a jacket had been lifted 100 times. "It's not the city," Eleanor said softly, as if reading his inventory. "That's the point," he said. He set his duffel on the bed and tried not to imagine another duffel there 3 years ago, unzipped in a hurry, a hand patting pockets to check for a lighter, for a pen. "You'll take first night watch solo for the next week," she said. "Low season means low staff. We rotate as we can. You'll have the truck." She tipped her chin downstairs. "Checkpoints are marked. You'll get the routes. It's mostly verifying that the campers who aren't supposed to be here aren't here, and the ones who are supposed to be here remember bears are real." A corner of her mouth moved. Not a smile. "Log everything. If you hear anything unusual on the radio, protocol is to log it and report in the morning. Don't investigate alone." He nodded. "Got it." She lingered a second longer than necessary, looking at the window like it owed her a debt. Then she said, "Welcome to Whisperwood, Ranger Torres," and went back downstairs to sign the rest of the forms that make a presence official. He stood in the quiet and listened to the station breathe. Somewhere below a fan kicked on. The compressor coughed. The faintest hum threaded the building like a low note you feel more than hear. He told himself he liked it. He said it out loud, just to make the air practice holding his voice. "I like it." Unpacking took 12 minutes. He folded the duffel under the bed. When he slid the closet door open, it stuck halfway, then yielded with an irritated sigh. Empty hangers knocked together, the sound of apology. He pushed aside a sagging parka that must have drifted to the back during cleaning, and found a small, spiral-bound notebook fallen behind a shoebox. He glanced toward the door, stupidly, as if he were about to be caught doing something he hadn't decided to do yet. Then he picked up the notebook and sat on the edge of the bed. The first pages were routine and a spidery, meticulous hand. Dates, weather conditions, trail conditions, exact times for patrol starts and returns. He felt himself relaxing. This was the language of competence. He flipped ahead. Animals noted. Elk turning earlier than usual. A bobcat sighted near the creek. A bear whose prints looked old until you put a hand down next to them. Then the entries began to tack a degree stranger, not because of what they said, but because of how they were said. Compass drift near Great Crag, plus or minus 15 degrees. Recalibrated. Drift persisted. Temperature anomaly at grid ref 247. 15 degrees drop inside a circle roughly 8 feet diameter. Not wind. Not shade. Felt it in teeth. The humming again. Not audible to Ellie. Reminds me of low diesel idle, but organic. Sits behind sternum. Another circle of stones northern boundary. Elk path diverts. Stones weren't there last week. Not placed. Grown? It watches us as much as we watch it. The line under that one was darker. Pressed through 2 pages like a thought tried to muscle itself into permanence. He kept going, heartbeat doing its own small trick, speeding when the script did, slowing when it settled into the calm of record-keeping again. Lost pages. Ink changed. From a cheap pen to something fine that left blue, wet lines with a halo. The handwriting got tighter, as if the hand gripping the pen knew it was running out of time. Found the cave behind Great Crag. Blue moss bioluminescent. Warmer than surrounding rock. Pulses with rhythm. Matches mine. Don't tell Ellie yet. She'll say rest. Sleeping is worse. Humming louder. If something happens. Cave entrance faces east. Narrow fissure behind alder clump. The blue moss isn't from here. He closed the notebook and looked at the room as if the walls held an opinion about it. Someone else had written that on this bed, in this light. Staring out of this window at a line of trees that didn't care about the difference between a past and a present tense. He put the notebook on the dresser, and told himself he'd hand it to Eleanor after shift. He told himself a lot of practical things. 9 o'clock set the forest to work. He met Eleanor downstairs and signed for the truck. The keys were attached to a tag with Station 7 scratched into it with something sharp. She gave him a laminated sheet of patrol points, a handheld radio, a thermos of coffee she must have set going before he pulled in. Call in every hour, she said. Even if it's nothing, let me hear you say nothing. Copy. He clipped the radio to his vest. Anything I should watch for? She looked like she might laugh and didn't. People, she said. Always people. Outside, night finished stitching itself across the sky. The pines made black ribs against stars. The truck started with a shudder, as if breathing in the cold was a decision. He rolled out onto the narrow access road, gravel scuffing the undercarriage, and headed toward the first checkpoint. Patrol, as promised, was straightforward. A loop around the lake, brief, reflective glints where tent stakes caught his headlights. A turn up toward the ridge. 2 sets of brake light ghosts where a couple had pulled off to enjoy a view that was gone now. He stopped at a gate where the road narrowed to a path and verified the lock. He called in on the hour, his own voice steadying each time he heard it come back tinny through the speaker. Station 7, this is Ranger Torres. Checkpoint Alpha, all clear. Eleanor's voice answered. Clean. Copy Alpha, all clear. He drove on. Frogs negotiated in the ditch. A barn owl ghosted across the headlights and vanished. A magician pleased you were fooled. The forest felt big and close in a way his city parks never had. The difference between concrete and soil isn't just texture, it's attention. Here the ground had spent a very long time watching. At 10:52 he pulled onto a turnout to stretch his legs. Crickets stitched the dark together. He could hear the radio rack back at the station in memory. Its polite transmissions, the comfort of systems that hold even when the night goes threadbare. He leaned on the hood, drank a mouthful of coffee, gone metallic in the thermos, and felt his heartbeat sync up with the soft hum that belonged to big machines and sleeping forests. He couldn't tell if the hum was outside or in. The compass on his dash twitched east, west, then settled. He watched it a second longer than he would have yesterday. He got back in. At 11:03 the radio gave a single, clean pop, like a knuckle cracking. A voice slid out of static with the confidence of someone who didn't know it was a ghost yet. Station 7, this is Mobile Unit. All quiet on the northern perimeter. Heading to Checkpoint Delta, the coffee did a trick in his throat. He picked up the handset, thumb hovering just above transmit, because once you press it, a thing becomes real. Mobile Unit? Say again, he said. Identify. A grainy hush. Then, Station 7. This is. A pause, a small laugh in the back of the throat, the kind you hear in break rooms when someone can't believe they almost used the wrong word. This is Ben. Sorry. Force of habit. Marcus's mouth kept working while the rest of him decided whether it would. Mobile Unit? I didn't copy your call sign. The voice softened, like a person leaning closer to confide through a screen door. What's my call sign again? The truck felt suddenly very far away from the building where paperwork makes everything reasonable. He looked at the laminated patrol card to give his hands an excuse to be doing something. Mobile Unit, he said carefully. State your location. Static widened, narrowed, the sound of a channel thinking. Nothing. Station 7, the voice said at last. The cadence professional in a way that made his ribs ache. False alarm. Mobile Unit out. The radio went dead in the relieved way an argument does, when both sides pretend they've won. He sat very still. He could call Eleanor. He could say, I think I heard something that sounded like your missing ranger, and it said a name your face already owns. He stared at the handset. The rule she'd given him, put a hand on his shoulder and squeezed. If you hear anything unusual on the radio tonight, log it, and report in the morning. Don't investigate alone. He put the handset back in its clip, and wrote neatly in his notebook, 2,303 hours. Unidentified transmission on CH7. Possible bleed from unknown source. Voice used term Ben. Claimed mobile unit on northern perimeter. No further traffic. He read the entry again and marveled at how ordinary words can make a very strange thing behave itself on paper. He drove on, because driving on keeps your hands from deciding to do something heroic and stupid. At midnight, clouds like torn cloth slid across the moon. The lake stopped pretending to be a mirror. He rolled down his window and let cold push in. The smell changed. Less pine, more iron. He rolled it back up. He called in. Station 7, Ranger Torres. Checkpoint Bravo, all clear. The speaker answered with a sound like wind peeling paint. Under it, a voice threaded through. Cautious. Marcus. Marcus, do you copy? He lifted the handset fast enough to bang his knuckles. Copy, go ahead. Don't. The voice broke into pixels of noise. Cave, Eleanor? He checked the channel. 7. He checked the signal strength. Full. Say again. Static like crushed foil. Then nothing. He pulled into the next turnout and killed his lights. The forest rushed up in the absence of the truck's small civilization. He could hear a creak somewhere down a slope, and the long, deep quiet of things that aren't asleep but have nothing to say to you. He opened Ben's notebook again because sometimes the right lie to tell your fear is that you're just gathering context. The page with Great Crag was damp at the corner where a thumb had learned to sit. He traced the words without meaning to. Found the cave. Blue moss. Pulses matches mine. A crackle. The radio again, not loud this time like the first version of a thought. Station 7, clear. Calm. I need backup. Then breath, uneven. The stones, they're moving. Marcus's spine went cold the way metal does in rain. He looked out at the pines and imagined stones making decisions in the night. The humming is so loud, the voice said, far away and perfectly inside the cab at the same time. I can barely think. He forced air into his lungs and out again, working the breath like a lever. Identify, he said. Mobile unit, identify. Marcus? Said the voice. Who's Marcus? Then, like a reflex thrown by habit, Eleanor, is that you? The script of every training he'd ever sat through came alive like a living thing and stood between him and what he wanted. He looked down at his hands. They were not shaking. That felt like betrayal, Ben, he said, and hated the way his own voice sounded saying a stranger's name like a prayer. Ben, where are you? What's your location? I'm home, the voice said, and in 2 syllables gave him more to fear than a lifetime of ghost stories. I'm finally home. You should come see. The forest. It's not what we thought. It's so much more. The transmission cut so cleanly it felt like a door hiding a hand behind it. He said nothing for a full minute. The truck ticked. The notebook sat open on his lap. The blue inked a deeper bruise in the low light. The pines waited. Out past the gate he'd checked earlier, somewhere beyond the polite line where maps stopped printing assurances, lay a place called Great Crag, and behind it, so said the careful handwriting of a man whose jacket had never made it home, lay a cave. A cave with moss that pulsed like a heart that didn't belong to a body. Eleanor's warning unrolled in his head, steady and unadorned. If you hear anything unusual on the radio tonight, log it and report in the morning. Don't investigate alone. He reached for the mic because following orders is a kind of spine too. He drew breath to call in. The radio crackled one last time, as if clearing its throat to make sure he was listening. Station 7. Ben's voice murmured, almost affectionate, like a senior teaching a rookie how to smile through a night shift. All quiet on the northern perimeter. Marcus lowered the mic very slowly and set it in its cradle as if it were an animal that might bite or might beg. He put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the road because movement keeps a man from deciding whether the world is playing a trick on him or simply telling the truth. Out beyond the splash of his headlights, somewhere in a dark that had learned how to be patient, something hummed like a held note and waited for him to decide whose rules he lived by. The second hour was supposed to be the easy one. The night settles. The campers settle. Your brain settles. Marcus kept waiting to feel that familiar click, as the route became a loop he could do with a hand tied behind his back and a coffee balanced on his knee. The click didn't come. He drove a slow crawl along the northern spur, tires drafting the soft shoulder where pine needles had built themselves into a seam. The truck's interior light made a small halo around the notebook on the passenger seat. He flipped it open between checkpoints the way a person checks a text they know they shouldn't. The script was tight, upright, practiced. The words were not. Compass won't hold near Sector 7. Not drift. Refusal. Needle slews stops, sits at east like it wants to confess something. Temperature drop localized. 15 degrees colder in a perfect circle. Spent 3 minutes inside it. Teeth hurt after. Breath felt heavy, like breathing through wet cloth. The humming isn't outside anymore. It's in my chest. Ellie doesn't hear it. I tried to record it. The recorder failed. The humming knows when I pay attention. He ran a thumb along the page edge like reassurance could be a tactile thing. He told himself multiple explanations. A bad magnetized dash. Microclimate pockets. The words of a man who'd been alone too long, even with radios. He put the notebook back, then took it out again, because leaving it closed felt like turning his back on someone speaking plainly. He switched the radio down to weather to let a neutral voice talk at him for a while. A baritone walked through fronts and pressures and a late-season dry lightning possibility. The normalcy soothed like a hand on the back of the neck. When his patrol timer ticked, he thumbed back to 7 and announced, "Station 7, Ranger Torres. Checkpoint Charlie. All clear." Silence. A hiss. A breath. A faraway scratch like a mouse in a wall. He waited. "Station 7. The words slid through static as if someone were pushing them under a door one syllable at a time. Ben reporting. His heartbeat misfired, then returned with a small, embarrassed lurch. He held the handset without keying it, as if speaking would acknowledge a rule he didn't want to live by. "Mobile," he began, then stopped. "Station. Copy that last." Nothing. The radios on the rack at the station would be lit like a small city. Eleanor would be working forms, ticking boxes, making the night behave on paper. He pictured her reaching for the handset, answering him with the kind of calm that turns a bad situation into one you climb out of. "Station 7. The same voice. Clearer. More sure. Ben Carter reporting." The name landed like a coin dropping into a jar that already had too many of the same kind. He swallowed. "Mobile unit. Identify." The reply was soft, the way a person speaks when they hate to repeat themselves because repetition makes it real. "Ben." He took a breath and felt the cab shrink around it. "Ben, what's your location?" Static found a shape. The edges of words without the words. He could hear his own pulse in the pause, the way a room listens to a person at a podium who hasn't decided whether they can afford the truth. "Sector 7, it said at last. "North boundary." A sound like someone turning slowly inside a stiff jacket. "The stones are wrong." Marcus stared out at the pines. Stones being wrong isn't a thing his training could hang a protocol on. Stones are the part of the world that votes no on wrongness, by virtue of having been around for all the versions of it. "I copy," he said. He didn't. He was copying belief back to a voice that dated 3 years ago. "Do you require assistance?" The pause this time was longer. Then, with terrible courtesy, "Negative, Tzusti Station." Just logging. The transmission ended so neatly his mind supplied the click of a handset being hung with care. He sat too long on the shoulder. Tires whispering to the gravel, eyes fixed on a dark line of alder that looked like it had been painted there. The forest didn't move. That was the part that bothered him. Even at night, a forest should fidget. A branch shrugging off due the invisible foot traffic of small lives. Whisperwood held itself like a person holding a pose for a photograph long after the photographer has given up. He called in, because a habit acted is a comfort earned. Station 7, Ranger Torres, checkpoint Charlie clear. He waited for Eleanor's voice and willed it to sound bored. The radio answered with a smear of sound like words dragged underwater. Then, a filament-fine thread inside the noise. Marcus, not a transmission. A thought, trying on his name. He keyed the mic. Eleanor? The forest leaned in like a listener. Static bristled with possibility. It felt like looking into fog and seeing forms your brain rushes to complete. Don't. The syllable came from far away or very close to his ear. Cave. He straightened in the seat hard enough to set his spine ticking. Say again. Silence came back like a door. He listened to it until it turned into something else. A pressure change, a fine grain of hum settling into the bones of the steering wheel, into the place under his breastbone where a person wears private fear. He checked the channel, still on 7. He checked the antenna connection, as if tightening a plastic collar could impose a universe where rules matter. Copy, he said to no one, and no one did him the kindness of answering. He drove. The route wound downward, a slow pretzel of gravel between trunks. The headlights found a footpath on the right, the kind made by insistence rather than intention. People had walked here because the landscape told them to, and the landscape had given way because it was generous in the way that eats you slower. He eased to a stop and killed the engine. Without the motor to hold his hand, the night wrapped him fully. Boots scuffed the verge. He dropped to a crouch. A narrow strip of mud held impressions like a page holds lines. 2 sets of boot prints worked along the path, overlapping in places where one had cut inside the other's stride. The tread pattern wasn't his. It wasn't Eleanor's. He'd noted her lightweight hikers in the station without meaning to. These soles were old Vibram, squared at the heel in a way no one manufactures now. The toes pointed toward Great Crag. A thrill of relief touched his throat. Finally, something human with edges you could use. He followed, careful. The prints were crisp, where the mud had stayed wet under overhang. They blurred where needles had drifted. 20 paces on, they turned around, then around again, then crossed themselves in a neat braid. He frowned, reached down, and touched one. The mud at the edge crumbled like stale cake. Old. Not hours, not even days. He stood, hands on hips, and felt the sensation of being watched arrive not from a direction, but from the idea of directions. Okay, he said aloud. The word disappointed him. It sounded like a man trying to be heard without waking someone. Okay. He worked the path another 50 yards. The prince led him to a downed cedar, climbed it, disappeared into a tangle of sword ferns, then emerged again on the other side heading back toward the truck. He stopped. Through trunks, 30 yards off, a pale glow showed and then hid as a breeze moved branches. Headlamp? Camp lantern. He clicked off his own flashlight and let dark do its version of vision. The glow pulsed once and held, not the way fire does but the way a signal does when it expects a reply. The radio whispered. No blast of white noise, no jump-scare courtesy. Just his name, a little closer to his own mouth than he liked. Marcus. He lifted the handset slow. Station 7. Identify. The radio, very softly, put his own last words back at him. Station 7. Identify. He stood still enough to notice the weight of the handset, to notice that the forest had innovators for silence. A second whisper braided itself around the first. A small delay. His own voice, again. Identify. A third. Barely there, as if someone 2 feet behind him had mimicked his breath, and gotten the timing wrong. Identify. He turned. Too fast. Beam slicing trunks. Nothing but dark, and shapes dark made. He put the handset back into its cradle because holding it felt like giving it ideas. Ben, he said to the trees, and his voice didn't sound like him for a second. A crack of someone older. If this is a recording, if someone thinks this is funny. Funny, the radio repeated, the tiniest degree too late to be his own voice. The glow showed again through the firs, higher this time, as if it had decided to hang. His brain supplied a branch with a lantern suspended from it, because that made a world he could move through without freezing. He made himself walk back to the truck, put the engine between himself and a night that had opinions, and drove on. Not away from Great Crag, toward it. He told himself why. A radio that misbehaves deserves a technician's patience. Someone had rigged something out there. A repeater. A kid with a baofeng and a taste for pranks. The practical thoughts did him the kindness of arriving with steps he could follow. You go to the source of the interference. You identify. You fix Station 7. The radio said gently, as if not to spook him. I need backup. The next words stumbled through static like someone trying to run in mud. The stones are moving. Copy, he said. He didn't. He needed the noise of his own voice in the cab. Describe. They're closer, the voice said, not describing at all. And the mosses, a break, a long breathless silence, then, spreading. He pulled onto the two-track that led up toward the ridge. Alder brushed both sides of the truck with the intimacy of strangers in a crowded hallway. The tires found ruts like tracks and committed to them. The world shrank to the white cones of his headlights and the tunnel they cut. Time got thin. He checked his watch and felt, stupidly, relieved that it still performed time in the agreed-upon fashion. 1:41. The numbers reassured only until he thought about the way time pulls strange in places where signals behave like dreams. At 2:05 he tried Eleanor again because rules are life rafts and you grab them even if the sea has other plans. Station 7, he said. Base, do you copy? Static unrolled like a rug. He put his thumb back on the transmit button. Eleanor, if you read me, Marcus. Her voice came through thin as ice on a puddle. Don't. The next word broke into components. A syllable. A breath. A consonant scraped to bone. Cave. Then the softest edge of a laugh threaded into the noise. Ben's. Or his memory of Ben borrowed by whatever had learned his name. He slowed. A narrow spur split off left. A teeth-gritting climb of embedded rock. The map said both roads looped the high ground and kissed again near a place the notes called Great Crag, like the park had named it, to make it less romantic to get hurt there. He chose the left spur. The truck crab walked up, back end fishtailing, chassis negotiating. The radio hissed. The hiss made words quit trying. Snow would make this slope impossible, he thought, and then scolded himself for comforting thoughts about a future version of the road when the present was busy making him small. He topped out into a stand of younger firs, trunks close, branches low. The headlights caught a sign at a skewed angle. The reflective tape that should have blared back civilized white gave him a dull, jaundiced blush, as if light itself weren't eager to help. Sector 7, the stencil said, though 7 looked like it kept considering being a 1. Someone had stapled a flapping ribbon of hazard tape beneath it, the words caution, repeatedly inverted and righted by wind, until meaning had worn thin. His phone offered him 1 bar out of politeness, then revoked it. He stopped and got out because you have to stand in a place to admit it exists. The air was colder. His breath wrote translations into the night. Not bitter cold. A purposeful cool. Like inside a museum climate box. The kind of air that keeps things. He took 3 steps off the 2-track. The temperature slid down his clothes and molded itself to his skin. Inside the ring of chill his ears popped. He stepped back, and it undid itself with a tiny, careful click. He tried again, and found the edge as precisely as a blind man finds a desk with his shin. An 8-foot disc, give or take, a pocket of winter inserted into July. He stood in it long enough for his teeth to ache, and then stepped out, because curiosity earns an answer, and then taxes it. Local inversion, he told himself, aloud, because the word local makes distance behave. Drainage. Microclimate. The humming isn't outside anymore, the notebook had said. It's in my chest. Moni didn't want to test that. His body tested it for him. The hum now sat under his sternum like he'd been made hollow for it. He put his palm flat against his shirt. The beat of his heart did a small, humiliating thing, trying to meet the hum in the middle as if the two could find a tempo that agreed on him. Don't, he said to his own body. The word didn't sound like a command. It sounded like advice he hoped would be taken. He got back in the truck because second guesses live shorter when you have a door between you and them. The radio clicked as if woken by his decision. Marcus, Ben said, relieved. You made it. His throat closed. He had to swallow twice to make room for speech. Say your location. At the cave, the voice said, like a person telling you to grab milk while you're out, because you'll pass the store anyway. Behind the great crag. The moss, a long exhale that wasn't static. It fogged the inside of the cab even though it shouldn't. It's alive. He should have been afraid. He was. Fear had been a companion since the first time he'd had to tell a mother she couldn't cross a line of tape to where the water ended and her son didn't. But layered under fear now was a bright, awful pull. The words alive and moss lived in his brain next to kindergarten projects and the smell of damp earth. The word alive didn't belong to caves. He wanted to see it even as the part of him that lived on good decisions put on boots and braced its legs. He keyed the mic. Hold position. I'm en route. The laugh that came back wasn't unkind. Where would I go? He drove. The road narrowed to a thought. Alder whipped the windows with the soft sigh of things that used to be green. The truck's undercarriage complained. The hum in his chest learned his name, and answered it the way a song answers a chorus. He dropped into low, and let the machine be both animal and plant, gripping, climbing, learning this slope the way roots learn rock. At the top the land eased, then tipped again toward a dark that was thicker and focused, like oil poured across the forest floor. He parked at the widest spot he could find and killed the lights. Darkness was immediate, intimate. A cloth laid over his head. He sat inside it and waited for his eyes to admit shapes exist, even when they refuse to be generous. Pines arranged themselves into a church of ribs. Lower growth made a black lace hem around trunks. He let himself have 30 seconds to listen, as if listening could earn permission. The night sound here was wrong, by virtue of being not there. No moths buffeted the glass. No mosquitoes tested the crack in the window. The only noise was that half-felt hum and, very far off, a voice practice breathing silence. He took the flashlight and got out. The path to the crag wasn't marked. Every foot that had found it had done so by agreement with the land rather than signage. He picked the route by looking where the dark seemed less sure of itself. He moved through the trees the way you do in a stranger's house. Careful not to knock anything over, careful to look like you belonged if someone turned on a light. The crag presented itself without drama. A bulge of old rock shouldering out of duff and root like a whale breaching in slow motion. The face of it showed toward the east, a crease running down one side where water had chosen to work over centuries. Alders had grown over that crease with the opportunism alders love. Behind them a black seam hugged the stone like a smile that knew how to mean more than one thing. He parted the alders with his forearm. The leaves were cool and dry. They felt like touching a page no one else has read. Inside the seam the air changed. It tasted mineral, and slightly sweet in the way dust tastes when it remembers it was once something alive. He crouched, turned the flashlight into the gap, and saw blue. Not the blue of LEDs. Not the tritium watchface blue that belongs to plastic and human design. This was a soft, aquatic lumen, as if the cave had taught itself moonlight. The glow came from a spreading that clung to the rock like suede. No fibers, no plant structure he recognized, just a contiguous skin that breathed. It pulsed in a slow, confident rhythm. He watched twice as long as he should have. before he realized he was taking his own breaths to match it. He pulled himself back, scraping elbow on stone, sucked in air, and it was the wrong thing to do. His chest tightened because the air outside the cave wasn't tuned to the rhythm he'd almost learned. He forced his lungs to belong to him, and then leaned in again, because terror does not always outrun the part of you that wants to know. The moss, if moss is what it was, grew in curds and sheets, curling around protrusions as if those protrusions had grown for it. He saw, near the mouth where light from his flashlight had washed weakly across the surface, a shape not of rock at all. It took his brain a second to understand because it had to put human back into the geometry first. A collar. A shoulder. The angle of a radio's belt clip. Not discarded, held. Blue had climbed over cloth and plastic, and made a relief of them. A fossil pressed not by time but by adoption. A name tape bubbled under, so swaddled in blue it would be ruin to touch it. He didn't touch it. The radio on his vest whispered. Not the speaker. The radio itself, the body of it, the way a seashell whispers if you put it against the right part of your head. He imagined, absurdly, the thing warming in his hand like a biscuit or a living thing, and shook himself like a dog shakes off rain. "It doesn't hurt," said Ben. Not through the speaker, from the walls. The voice didn't echo. The blue ate echo. It's like joining on a night you didn't think would ever let you in. Marcus set his back against the cool rock outside, and stared at the alders as if leaves could be witnesses in court. His mouth had adhered to his teeth. He peeled it off, and spoke the absolute truth because lies sounded like they'd grow mold here. Lied, I don't want this. "You say that now," Ben said, almost fond. "You share a desk with a ghost all night, and see if it doesn't make sense after a while." He pictured the coffee ring upstairs. The nail holes, the jacket hook worn smooth. He pictured Eleanor's face when she stopped herself from saying Ben, and how the stop had hurt more than the word would have. He pictured the search form she'd filled out with the tidy brutality bureaucracy's license when the only kindness left is accuracy. "Marcus," the radio said suddenly. Eleanor's voice, clean for 3 syllables, then hauled over gravel for the 4th. "Report." He yanked the handset up like it was a rope thrown down. "At the crag," he said. "At the cave." "Get out," she said, and then the radio said it again, but not her. "Get out," the wall said, trying her mouth on like a shirt it wanted to fit. He took 3 backward steps and hit the ring of cold he hadn't noticed he'd walked into. It closed around his hips like a level of water. His thighs prickled. He stepped again and his knees stung like opening a freezer on bare skin. He forced himself forward out of it, and the relief felt like consent, and he hated the part of him that took it. "Look," Ben said softly, as if he were a museum docent guiding a child's hand toward glass. "Put your light away." Marcus didn't. He dimmed it to a whisper, and let it hang in his fingertips, a not quite threat. The blue brightened fractionally in answer. It felt like eye contact. He breathed through his nose, so the cave couldn't hear him decide. "What is it?" he asked. "A boundary," Ben said. "A different category of belonging than you've met." Ben had never sounded like a poet in the notebook. The lines had been hard numbers and neat observations. Marcus wondered if Blue did that too. Taught you to talk in a way Night could eat. His practical mind stalked him like a good dog that refuses to be dismissed. He thought of the SAR team's rules he'd taught to volunteers. Don't split your party. Maintain comms. Know your exits. He looked back down the slope and tried to trace the way he'd come. The 2-track had already hidden itself in fur shadow, becoming theory again until he insisted on it with boots. He keyed the mic because keys were things in the world you could count. "Eleanor," he said, to the night outside as much as the woman at the desk. "Their cave. I'm leaving. I'm coming back to base." Saying it makes a future. Static held him for a heartbeat like hands you can't see. Then, cleanly, unhurried. "Copy," she said. It was her. It was the particular roughness a human voice gets at 3 in the morning. "Marcus, Listen to me carefully. Walk back the way you came. Do not turn off your light. Keep talking. I'll keep talking too. He wanted to ask what she knew that made her tell him how not to be taken. He didn't, because he heard the cost of knowing in the small break on the word carefully. He tested the cold ring with his shin like a person tests a current with a stick. He stepped past it, into warmth, which shouldn't live in the same sentence as cave at night. He turned his light up and put it on the ground so it made a fat coin of certainty around his boots. Leaving the site, he said, narrator of his own survival. 1 step 2 3. The moss pulsed. The cadence of it changed. Not speed, emphasis. It was not a heart. Hearts concede to panic. The blue kept its time, like someone who refuses to clap along when the song doesn't deserve it. He felt his own pulse do an ugly skip trying to apologize. Keep talking, Eleanor said. She wasn't on the radio now. She was in his ear, because his brain had decided to make her a metronome. 4, he said. 5. The whisper breathed his number back. Not radio. Trees. 5. Came from the right, a beat late. 5. From behind, forgetting to be late. He stepped faster, because speed makes promises the body likes. He counted too loud, because loudness is a bet that nothing will demand silence. At the alders he did the wrong thing without meaning to. He looked back. The cave mouth held its glow the way a bedroom window holds a parent's reading light, long after a child pretends to sleep. The blue had pulled a shade down over whatever the shape in the wall had been. The smoothness where jacket and radio had been visible an instant ago remained, but less distinct, as if the cave wished to be modest now that he was leaving. Marcus, Ben said, not through any device. It's so much easier if you stop doing it alone. He felt something like anger then, clean and useful. The indignation of a man who has moved many heavy things in the world without anyone offering him an easier way that didn't cost him his name. I'm not alone, he said. Not tonight. He pushed through leaves, took the slope in controlled haste, and didn't stop until the truck accepted him like a habit. He shut the door, locked it, then unlocked it again, because he was not a child, and locks matter less here than a functioning engine. He started the truck. The motor took a beat longer than usual to agree. When it did, the relief hit him like heat. The radio cleared its throat. Brasano Marcus, Ben said, warmer now, companionable. Brasano, commies you'll be back. Jeremitroj, which he put the truck in gear, and eased it onto the 2-track. He wanted to gun it. He didn't. The road would punish arrogance with a broken axle. He drove like a person leaving a friend's house after a late conversation that went too far, careful not to wake anyone, pretending he hadn't been changed. He reached the sign where 7 kept trying to be 1, and stopped long enough to reach up and touch the reflective number with the tip of his finger. Cold. Ordinary. The tape under his nails scraped the surface. Some of the dull film came away. The number shone in his headlights like a truth that had been available all along. He blew out a breath he didn't know he was hoarding and laughed once. It sounded like a bark, like a man telling a dog to heel. See, he told himself aloud, interference. Psychological projection. Weird lichen. I have a list. No, he put the truck back in gear. A voice that had been his voice for 30 years answered him from the radio with perfect timing, perfect intonation, perfect stupid bravado. I have a list. The hand that wasn't on the wheel tightened until the knuckles clicked. He didn't pick up the mic. He didn't say stop. He drove. The 2-track became a road. The road became an idea. The idea widened into a station that would still be breathing when he returned. The forest let him go with the patience of a thing that has kept rock company long enough to understand people as interim phenomena. At the last bend before the access road met the lot, the radio softened. The hiss thinned to a sympathetic presence. Then Ben spoke one more time, clearly, as if he had set his mouth by the transmitter, as if he had leaned in. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't a warning. Marcus, he said, tender, delighted, certain. I found it. The moss. It's alive. You should come see. Dawn came grey and thin, not so much a sunrise as a lifting of one darkness for another.
Eleanor's tires cracked frost as
She nosed her truck into the turnaround below Great Crag. Marcus's rig was already there, driver's door shut, windows ghosted with condensation. The engine was cold. She set her hand on the hood just to be certain. Nothing. Not even the aftertaste of heat. "Marcus," she called, though she already knew. The forest answered with its mourning. A jay scolding somewhere too far, a branch easing from ice. But under that, deep enough you had to want to hear it, came a hum. Not the whine of insects, not the mechanical throb of distant machinery. Lower, slower. Like a body breathing just behind a wall. She forced herself through the alder thicket to the seam in the rock. The cave gaped like a place that had been busy all night. Inside, her flashlight found what she feared. A new impression in the wall, blue moss still glowing faintly around its edges. The shape was crude but undeniable. The slope of shoulders, the bend of arms folded in as if for sleep. The outline was still warm when she touched it with gloved fingers, as if whoever it had claimed hadn't quite finished leaving. She staggered back, the light jerking with her, and the hum swelled just a fraction, like a sleeper disturbed by movement nearby. Her pulse begged her to run, to seal her ears against it, but training kept her steady. She piled rocks into the seam, not elegant, not permanent, enough to make a door a casual hiker wouldn't notice. Enough to tell herself she had tried. Each stone she dragged rattled louder than it should have, and each time she paused, the hum grew clearer, sinking with the rhythm of her own chest, until she shoved the next rock in place, just to drown it again. When it was done, she stood with her palm flat against the cool granite, and for one awful instant she could swear the stone rose and fell beneath her hand, a slow inhalation. She snatched her touch away and whispered, "You stay there," though she knew the forest owed her nothing. Back at the station, the ordinary world tried to reassert itself. Papers, logs, protocols. She typed Marcus's name into the system, filled the blanks with the official lie. Ranger Torres failed to return from patrol. Extensive search conducted. No trace found. She'd written those words before. She hated how easily her fingers knew the sequence. The radio sat on the desk, black and inert. She didn't touch it, not until the static crackled alive on its own. She froze, pen half raised. Station 7, mobile unit reporting. All quiet on the northern perimeter. Her throat closed. The voice was casual, easy, familiar. Another voice answered, steady and calm. "Copy that, mobile unit. Just another night in Whisperwood." Her pen slipped and rolled onto the floor. She didn't pick it up. She couldn't. Because those voices weren't meant for her. She could hear it in the cadence, in the way they spoke to each other like men who'd worked side by side for years. Ben and Marcus. Together, comfortable. The way rangers sound when the forest is theirs and always has been. She lowered herself into the chair, stomach hollow, heart insisting on silence. The voices went on, trading idle remarks about weather, trail conditions, the kind of chatter that fills empty hours. They were calm, they were endless. And she knew, with a cold certainty that tightened her spine, they were speaking for someone else's benefit. Someone, not yet here. The radio hissed, then settled. Two voices overlapping, casual and patient, as if welcoming a third. "In Whisperwood Forest," Eleanor whispered, though the words weren't for her anymore. "The rangers never really leave. They just keep watch, waiting for the next one to join them." The radio gave a last burst of static, then softened into a low thrum. If you leaned close enough you might hear them. Not just two now. More. A layered murmur. Voices braided together like roots underground, calm and endless, waiting. The forest had time. It could wait forever. And the station, neat and ready, had a vacancy again.